What's going on, everyone? Welcome to In the Zone. I'm your host, Garrison Roy. Today, we're going to have an episode really more focused on the mental side of the game that helps you stay in the zone mentally. But we do go into other topics such as what helps you stay in the zone as far as skill acquisition, as far as training zones, things that help you stay locked in and not get too off into the weeds. I do go on rants for some people who may be new to this, right? Those rants are going to go off and talk about how maybe some things are helping guys from performing or not helping them perform, right? Based on certain things that I'm seeing that could be hindering players, ways on how they go about things. Also, full length interviews with experts, athletes, and coaches, and how they help others get in the zone or how they themselves get in the zone. So if you have any other questions or topics or future guest suggestions that you want on here, please hit me up in any of the DMs that you see this on Instagram, X, TikTok, any of those. Go ahead and hit me up and drop in any of those. Or you can email it into inthezonepodcast123@gmail.com. And I do really appreciate it when you guys share the show because I believe in value exchange. My mission for this podcast is to grow the game of baseball and keeping it real and giving all this value out for free. So please share the show if you get anything out of it, even if it's not this episode, if it's another episode, continue to share it. I probably lose around $1,000 or more a year, or maybe more than that if you want to count my time towards this as well. Just doing this for free. So again, please pay it forward. And I believe in the value exchange. So if I'm giving out value, if you guys can give me some value in sharing the show, that would be absolutely awesome. But to bring it all into the mental minute today, I'm going to talk a little bit about performance anxiety. And of course, that doesn't help you stay in the zone at all. If anything, that gets you out of your flow state, that gets you out of the zone and gets you thinking about other things other than the present moment. Right. And really, I was reading this research study, and I'll add it here in the show notes too. But there was a research study where it said when you have anxiety, the brain synapses actually change when you have anxious thoughts repetitively. So not if you just have one or two, but if you repetitively do it, it changes how your brain really perceives reality, which is how some guys, or maybe even people outside of sports, they have stage fright. You go right in front of people and they keep thinking about all these things. Oh, I have all this anxiety. I have this weird gut wrenching feeling whenever I get up and try to talk to people, or even for the podcast, for example, right? All these little things can add up to that. But what really boils down to and like what anxiety comes from, right? Because in all honesty, anxiety is really more of a symptom. It's not something that's actually the main cause, right? Same thing on how you would go about correcting pitching mechanics or hitting mechanics, right? The one little flaw that you may see in a swing might be due to an intention of what a guy's trying to do, maybe also be due to poor coaching cue that they may have misinterpreted or that a coach may have misinterpreted and is trying to force certain things that aren't supposed to happen. But same thing goes for your mental state, right? If you're having anxiety, the real root of it is actually in fear. Fear of what, though, right? Because it could be different than anyone. I've had previous episodes where I talk about fear of failure or fear of, boiling down to just looking dumb, right? If you get over that fear, a lot of things can open up for you. But really, the biggest thing, too, that I think a lot of this younger generation comes up with, again, a lot of anxiety, a lot of things that they're having to do, a lot of stimulation that they have going on in their brains, right? Whether it be TikTok or Snapchat, whatever it is, or that overload of information of whatever they can get, even this podcast, for example, right? They can just continue to listen to this on hours and hours and hours upon end, but it's almost an infodemic, if you will, right? It's a little overloaded, and with all of that, you can kind of go to a Spider-Man quote: "With great power comes great responsibility." So if you have all of this knowledge as power, then that's something that you maybe, and even myself, where I was before all this age of information, I was just going to camps and a bunch of other things whenever I was younger. And I put a lot of pressure on myself because I knew, okay, hey, I know better to make these mistakes. My parents have paid X amount of money for me to learn how to play the game the right way. And I did do it, but whenever I messed up, I had those anxious thoughts, or I had all these things that were kind of stirring up inside, or I beat myself up because really I had this illusion of control, thinking that I could control the game or thinking that I could control things that I couldn't control. Right. And I've talked about this before, learning to control the controllables. And I'm sure a lot of coaches have broken this down. And I've first saw this from Ken Ravizza, um, where he broke it down in his Heads Up Baseball book. But I think it's just absolutely beautiful. And I say it to all the guys that I coach day in and day out is, can you control what an umpire does? No, you can't really control that. You can coax him to probably call you out on strike three if you have bad body language, right? If you're moping, or as a coach, you're griping at him, that zone might get a little tighter whenever your team's on defense. When they're pitching, you continue to gripe at them. And then the other teams might get a little wider whenever you're hitting. So in that aspect, yes, you can't fully control him like a puppet on a string, but certain things can help allude to what they might be doing. However, right, this illusion of control. As a pitcher, it's easy to control your emotions, but it's also not easy whenever things are going wrong. I had a teammate in the past. I'll leave out his name and what team I was playing for. But basically, I was throwing really well, getting guys to ground out, doing things that I could control myself. Ground balls right to second base. Literally, I kid you not, 2 balls in a row, 2 ground balls to second base, errors on both of them. Booted error and fielding, or booted error when they tried to make a throw and just airmailed it. Again, that guy was going through some other things, like I mentioned, I'm not going to mention his name, but that alone, or maybe even when you break it down to guys for yips, you can't really control that, right? But some of those things where you have the fear of, oh, I can't make another error, or I'm going to, insert whatever. If you're putting so much pressure onto yourself, that's where a lot of that anxiety does come from. Or if your parents are putting pressure on yourself, or your coach is putting pressure on you, or the media outside is putting a lot of pressure on you, right? That's some things that you have to let go and release and be like, okay, hey, I can't have any control over this, right? And you got to see things a little bit beyond the surface. Like, yeah, okay, cool. There's an error. So what? Everyone makes mistakes. Learn from it. Absolutely learn from it. And then move on. But don't hold it captive. Don't grip it and internalize it, or internalize it towards, any of that anger or fear towards you, because then that's just going to make it worse. Right. And again, I've talked to this about you guys before. I am a Christian, so I do have scriptures that I would refer to for this as well. Obviously, there's other proverbs and things of such nature you could do, but 1 Peter 5:7, cast all your anxieties on him because he cares for you. And that is really so true. And again, it's not just like, hey, we're going to throw it all up there, but you need to just not internalize it, right? It's not casting it and putting all that pressure on yourself. It's casting it away, taking it out of you. Like, hey, I am responsible for any mistakes that I make. I do have consequences, but at the same time, I can't do anything to fully control that. All right. So keep your head up, keep on keeping on, but know that when you feel some anxiety, that there's a deeper level to this, and something that you need to probably dig a little bit deeper into. And it may not be fixed within one cue or one small tweak in a practice. This is something that you're going to have to work on day in and day out, even throughout your daily life. Maybe you have anxiety for a test. Well, Why would you have anxiety for a test? Maybe you feel underprepared. So then you need to practice. Same thing with the game of baseball, right? If you're underprepared, you're going to be anxious or nervous. But now there's a difference between having anxiety and nervousness and actually just being excited, being pumped up, right? And the good players, they can still feel that and still go out and perform and not let that bother them, or not let it freeze them into the performance of what they need to do, right? I talk about this on several other episodes as well, but having an anchor or a deep breathing relaxation routine in game, out of game, right? It's really good to practice outside of the game, and how you can have a more centered, fully present, you could talk about it as a yoga sense or however you want to, right? But being in the present moment and being centered is some words that you could use. But the more you practice that, the more you can actually be in the current place and time, in that mindfulness, right? And even just having a routine can help you with that as well. So having a pre-pitch routine, or I had a teammate who was very particular on where he would put the bat, or how he would put bats down in the dugout, how he would place his mitt. So if he knows that's where it is, he doesn't have to panic and be like, "Oh man, where's my stuff? Where's my stuff? Where's my stuff?" He already knows where it is. Or, all the stuff that you take off whenever you get on base. They all know, everyone in the dugout knew where to put his stuff, because was his area, right? So that can take away a lot of unneeded stress, unneeded anxiety of things where you're really can control, right? You can control where you put your stuff in the dugout. You can control, your body language and after the fact of what happens. Again, not saying that you shouldn't be upset about some things, but you can be responsible for how you respond. So I know this was a little bit more deeper into the weeds as far as the mental minute goes, but I wanted to kind of touch base with this because it seems to me like a lot of people just like, oh, I have anxiety, oh, I have this, and they internalize that label. They just say, oh, I'm an anxious person. I don't really think that's true. I think you're just experiencing an emotion, right? Jordan Peterson says this a lot, and I've listened to him quite often in some of his previous interviews, where if you label yourself as an emotion, right? There's thousands of different emotions, probably over exaggerating a little bit, but a lot of different emotions that you can have. And if you internalize or label yourself as one type of an emotion, then you're not really having a full essence of who you are as a human, right? And to kind of break this out into a little bit more of a Christian sense, and again, this is just my perspective, guys, but when you are having humor towards things, or you hear the scriptures like, oh, I die to myself daily, the root word humor, or humus, not hummus that you would eat, but humus is basically the stuff that you would peel out of a garden. So you have, your well-knit garden, and then you pull out all of these little weeds, or all of these dead pieces of, flowers or bushes, whatever it is, and you put that over in a pile. And that's what happens whenever you die to yourself, or die to things that are not productive, that are not producing fruit, or that are not producing good performance in the baseball side, right? If you can't see what those things are, that's where you need some outside perspective to help you out, such as a coaching service for baseball, or such as having an accountability partner, or even parents or a friend or someone close to you that can kind of call you out on your BS. If you don't have someone that is like that in your life, I highly encourage you to do that for someone so that they can in return do it for you. But again, I'm a little bit on a tangent, rambling here, but that's just kind of what I got on that performance anxiety side of things and what the root actually is. But if you guys have any other questions, topics that you want to hear, please let me know, and stay in the zone.